as you can see, the topic of this talk is very generic. It says Cloud Foundry for everyone. And the idea, what we had in mind when we initially did this talk, we first time presented this at the CF Summit in Philly and on some meetups, is to basically show how can Cloud Foundry be easily accessed by people that have never used it before. So what are the easiest ways to get to a Cloud Foundry environment, to play around with it, and basically get the hands dirty to, and see what it can do for you. So, okay, that's us. This is my colleague Mirna. I'm Matthias. We both work for a company called Novatec in Stuttgart in Germany. We do consulting and in a technology area for in the cloud native space. And I think with that, okay, now it works. So, this will also be maybe a bit of a recap of the things, of some of the things that we had already yesterday. As you may know, this is like the intro, getting started track, so there is no previous experience or whatever required. We want to have people here to learn and get familiar with the technology. So this is the initial setting. So you see that confused person and like, this is Cloud Foundry. So what is this Cloud Foundry and what can I do with it? In order to do that, I'm teaching at 2 universities in the area of Stuttgart, and I had 2 students working with me that I knew that had no prior experience with Cloud Foundry at all. I mean, they know about like microservice development, a bit about containers, but not much. So I gave them basically the task to say, okay, try to figure out what is Cloud Foundry. Give me like 5 statements or whatsoever, and also figure out how can you access it. I mean, you don't get it. You're not going to get any money or like something you can spend. So how can you get there for free and get something done without paying for it? So they came back with a couple of things. If they found out about the platform really quickly, so it's an open source PaaS platform. It's easy to use, supports developers, supports many languages, and so on. So that was already a pretty good overview. But what really impressed me most, and that only basically took them a week or so, when they said, okay, we were already like able to push our first application to Pivotal Web Services. This is something I didn't expect, and I didn't instruct them how to do, but they figured it out by themselves, and it showed me it's easy enough, so people can actually do it. So we basically want to walk you through a little bit of that story, and by the time we finish this talk, I hope you will all get an idea of basically what is Cloud Foundry, what are the basics of the technology, how does it work, how can you interact with it through the CLI, what kind of options are there to use Cloud Foundry, and maybe if time allows, what can you expect from that in the future? I mean, that's probably, you heard more on that in the keynote stages today, so maybe we're going to go over that more quicker. Okay, so with that, I'm going to pass on to Mirna. Is that mic on? Can you hear me?
I guess it's working over. Yeah. Okay. So, some basic information about Cloud Foundry. A way to get started with Cloud Foundry, to get some, or to have an overview about the fundamentals, about the available tutorials or trainings, is to reach the Cloud Foundry homepage, where you can find a Get Started link, and then you either say, I'm totally new to Cloud Foundry, I want to understand the fundamentals first, I want to have a look about the theoretical knowledge behind it, and then you go with the new to Cloud Foundry link. Or you say, okay, I have all the needed information to get started now, I understand all the concepts behind it, and I just want to give it a try and deploy my first application to Cloud Foundry, and then you go with the I'm ready to try link. A very simplified overview about Cloud Foundry, seeing it from a high-level overview, seeing it as a black box, how to communicate with it, and what to get back from it. We have mainly 2 groups of users interacting with Cloud Foundry, the developers and the consumers. The developer pushes an application to Cloud Foundry. Cloud Foundry does something inside and returns a URL back to the consumer, who can then just access the application and consume the application logic. Looks very easy, doesn't it? Now, if we want to go a little bit more into the details, if we want to have a look inside that black box, how does it really work? And before going more into the details, an important thing to mention here is that Cloud Foundry internally relies heavily on a model which is oriented on the dual-factor apps guidelines and splits the components into two main categories, the applications and the services. The applications is where the developer pushes an application, brings a piece of code into Cloud Foundry using the magical CF push command. Then the application is pushed to the platform internally, and a so-called droplet is created. The droplet is the application along with the build back, so the application code along with all the runtime dependencies which are needed in order to run that application. And if the application needs to connect to a backing service, like a messaging service, database service, and so on, we can create a service instance and bind it to our application using the CF create service and bind service commands. And the developer does not have to worry about any configuration of connection settings here. And here's the services part of Cloud Foundry. And at the end, the platform will return a route to the developer or consumer who can then access the application. And this is like the fundamental understanding which everybody should have before getting started with Cloud Foundry. There's the Cloud Foundry command line interface, which is a generic API which can be used across the different Cloud Foundry providers. So no matter where you run Cloud Foundry locally on your own machine, using a public Cloud Foundry provider, or using hosted options, this Cloud Foundry CLI will always look the same. And you have this basic set of commands that you can use, the CF push command in order to push your application, the CF scale in order to decrease or increase the number of instances of your application, the CF marketplace in order to list the service offerings in the provider, and the CF create service and bind service commands in order to create a service instance and attach it to your application.
Okay, thanks. So stepping a bit away from the technical, more to the human things, you probably realized that in the 2 days now, the Cloud Foundry ecosystem is surrounded by a pretty strong community. I would just want to highlight a few community resources that might make sense for you if you intend to learn more and get started with different things. I mean, within those 2 days, we try to cover a lot on this track, but we're not able to pretty much cover everything. So, of course, there's a Slack channel where you can find help very, very easily. You can start on the general channel, and then people will guide you into either certain topics or help you directly. There's a GitHub repository mailing list. As Abby just mentioned, there is this ambassador program, which I'm a proud member of. So basically, these are the people. They are also listed on the webpage in case you don't know who they are. We are meant to help you, so please feel free to reach out to us whenever you feel like, and we're happy to give advice and help you further. Of course, there's Twitter, and there's an active community there as well, so you should be able to get in touch with somebody. Also, if you browse the webpage a little bit, you will find a lot of community contributions that help you getting started. There are many materials, guides, courses, whatsoever. In particular, I should say there's this Cloud Foundry for Beginners Zero to Hero workshop, which is for free. So you can play through that workshop with pretty much every trial Cloud Foundry distribution, which I think is a pretty good way to get started. Also, Steve Greenberg, one of our really good ambassador and community members, has set up this page, trycloudfoundry.com. I might have an excursion to that later on if we have time. In the end, they will walk you through similar steps that we're going to do on this demo, basically pick a provider, start doing the first commands, interacting with the platform, and getting familiar with that. So now we're going to talk about the different options on Cloud Foundry.
Yeah, thanks. So now you decided to get started with Cloud Foundry and you want to push your application to Cloud Foundry. Which options do you have? You can either have Cloud Foundry locally in your machine using a local installation of Cloud Foundry, or you can use the different public providers there, or you can have a hosted option, which is not probably the more suitable or the most suitable option to start with. It's better to start with the local or public option and get familiar with using it, and then just you can try the hosted options on larger data centers. Now, starting with the local options, which possibilities do you have? The first option is the so-called BCF Div. It's a free offering from Pivotal. It's a single-node Cloud Foundry instance, and it has a full functional scope from a developer perspective, much more than from an operator perspective, since it's just only one Cloud Foundry node. It has a basic set of services, database services, messaging services, and caching services. And it's free. All you need to do is just to register in Pivotal and have an account there in order to be able to use it. The second option is the so-called CF Div. It's based on the open source version of Cloud Foundry. It runs on Mac OS, Windows 10, and recently also on Linux. As far as we know, it has only one available service, the MySQL service. It's also free, and no registration is needed. All you need to do is just to get it from the public GitHub repository. And the third option, the CF Local, it's not really a real Cloud Foundry runtime. It runs the droplets in containers, which makes it very suitable for local debugging and testing purposes. So it may not be the most suitable option for you to start with as a beginner with Cloud Foundry. It's better to start with the BCF Div or CF Div options first. Now moving to the public Cloud Foundry providers, here is the list of certified providers according to the Cloud Foundry homepage. And most of them offer a trial to start with, but we are not going to highlight all of them in detail today, since we are not able also to try all of them when we prepared this talk a couple of months ago. For example, Atos were under changes of their trial offering, and we were not able to try it. Cloud.gov offers that only for governmental and educational institutions in the US. So we'll just talk about some of them today. Starting with Pivotal Web Services. So as you've heard from Matthias, the experiment with the 2 students as beginners, as a feedback from them, the first public Cloud Foundry provider that they discovered was Pivotal Web Services. They found it really very easy and straightforward to use. And it focuses on microservices development, so it has a lot of options for database, messaging, caching, and streaming services. And it has an explicit focus also on Spring Boot, so it has a lot of services like the circuit breaker, the config service, and the service registry services. Moving to IBM Cloud. IBM Cloud has mainly 2 different options: the Global Cloud Foundry Platform, or previously known as Plumix, or the Cloud Foundry Enterprise Edition, which gives you a dedicated cluster with different Cloud Foundry nodes, which may not be the suitable option to start with. And it has the biggest service offering focusing on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and IoT. And the feedback that we got from the students here was that it was not as easy or as intuitive as other providers, especially that it offers different CLIs to use, the CFCLI, the IBM CLI, and so on, which was a little bit confusing. But at the end, they could be able to run their application and get everything running. And maybe the reason for that is that Cloud Foundry is only one part of the big cloud offering that IBM Cloud has.
All right, so I'm take over for here. Maybe I'll go one step back, and maybe we have to add a third option here. You saw it this morning in the keynotes. You can also run Cloud Foundry now on OpenShift. So we're not up to date with the slides so fast, but it's probably important to say that IBM does a lot here and tries different things, and with that different things comes in a bit of confusion. In the end, from a core perspective, like the Cloud Foundry runtime is all the same, and you should be able to make your way through that. Another one we definitely want to highlight, good friends of ours, a company from Any9s. The feedback we got there was they had a really, really fast registration process. So basically from logging in to like getting your code running on the platform was really quick. They also provide some really helpful instructions on how to do the first steps already in the page and on the email for the registration. So this was very user-friendly. Now SUSE, it plays a different role here, because SUSE is listed as a certified provider, but they don't have like a public offering in a way that Any9s or Pivotal or IBM does. They have an own distribution, but this is basically meant to be installed on premises. And they're very active in that new technologies around like integrating with Kubernetes, especially in the topic of Quarks. So with that, you're basically able to install a Cloud Foundry installation really quickly if you have an existing Kubernetes system. We don't have a demo on that, unfortunately, so we hope to be able to do that if we give the talk next time. Everything we do is 100% open source, so it's really easy to get started with that. Now, with this table, I wouldn't want to guarantee that this is always correct. We have to change and update this one quite a bit. This gives a bit of an overview of what the various providers offer to you as a free trial version. So for example, I think initially Pivotal Web Services had a limit of 90 days. Now this has changed to like 87, for whatever reason, $87 that you can consume and spend. And when you have used that for your application and services runtime, then basically you would be in a position to charge. The differentiators are also in a way like what is the volumes that you can have. I mean, basically this is the RAM allocation of your services, which would cost you. The latest research, like the one with IBM, stands out here that you can have a never expiring version for free, but in turn this one has only a limitation for 256 megabytes. Yeah, so slightly variations. The biggest variations are probably in the amount of build packs and services. This is basically, build packs means the provided runtimes for your application. For example, in a Java application, that would be like a build pack containing a JRE in order to run it and so on. And also on the side of the backend services. I mean, again, IBM stands out on this one with by far more than anyone else because they have like a huge cloud service offering. So it leaves you with the result that you have to try which one you want to use and fits best to your application. Okay, so with that, we switch over to the demo. And so basically, I mean, we're not going to demo very much here. It's just basically we will try to show you how we analyzed and assessed this. So basically, we're going to log into like 2 or 3 different providers. Try to push an app, maybe buying a service, and then basically we're going to list the build packs and list the service offering, so you can see that in general the access to each of the environment totally feels the same. The difference really comes with the offerings of the services. So I think today we're going to show something about Any9s, maybe Pivotal, and also what Mirna initially said, you have like a local VM option, then you have like a hosted provider option, and you have like an on-premise installation option. So this is normally not the one you get started with, but this is normally the one you get productive with. And as we had Thomas Müller from Daimler on the keynote stage showing that new Daimler Pass implementation, we happen to work with them and give education for that platform, so we also have a login. That means we can also like show you a login into the Daimler environment here and just like show to you that it is totally consistent if you run it as like on a local dev VM or on a productive backend. And it's really like it's just the same style how you would push and deploy your application and roll them out.
Can you just see it or do you have to make it bigger? Okay, good. So we can then start showing the build packs here.
So as you can see, maybe from the URL, the API endpoint, it says DHC Pass. That stands for Daimler Hybrid Cloud. And we'll log into that now. So we can see they have a standard set of build packs for various application languages and things they want to have the developers enabled to deploy their applications on. If you can quickly show the marketplace. That will show the available service offerings, and I think in the keynote they also mentioned that they use the service offerings from Any9s. Oh, there's a lot, okay. But you can maybe see that there's some Any9s references here to the backend, so this was not a lie, those services are really there. The only problem that we have right here, we can log into the API endpoint, but we can't log into the VPN where we deploy the application. So we could push potentially an application, but we couldn't shoot a front end. So we're gonna log out on this one and show you the some of the basic steps on another one.
Any9s look in?
Any9s looks good. So as you can see here, I mean, you have this CF API locally on your machine, and you just basically exchange the so-called targets. Like the target is the API endpoint that your Cloud Foundry API points to. And from there, you have totally the same scope of operations. So now we just basically switched from a productive environment to like a test environment that we have here. And yeah, so you can run the same thing. Now you can see the build packs that are offered here are somewhat different. This is basically the decision of each provider of a platform, what kind of build packs they offer. There are also the options for the developers for themselves to bring own build packs in case the provider allows that. So this is just basically the basic set that you have. If we look at the marketplace here, it should look fairly similar. Hopefully. Yeah. Okay. So again, as this is Any9s, you would expect some Any9 services. Here they are, and with them you basically see it's a bit shifted, but you have a service and a plan, and you see that there are different plans, and that means you can select a certain let's say quality plan of an application or a scope plan. So you can see you can offer like a small database which might be for free or has like some minimum cost, or you can have a plan of like a clustered HA database which would cost the user more. And in the end, you expose that to the developers of the application and say, well, you probably know best what kind of application, like a backend system you need, and then you basically just install it. I mean, can you just show like a CF create service command or something?
Yeah, I guess I have it here somewhere. Yes.
Yeah, so this is basically the way how you would do that thing. So you see the list of services, and then you do a CF create service, and then it will instantiate that service, and it's there for you. This is the only thing you need to do, and in the end, you need to bind that service to an application that you pushed before. I mean, we can show us the way how to push an application.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, this is CF push is probably the command you have heard most often in the context of Cloud Foundry, and that's basically what it is. Dr. Nick gave a great demo on that yesterday. So this is a quick recap. We're going to push one application now that we have built before. And so this will basically do the steps that Mirna had shown initially in that flow chart. So now it's uploaded the source code, it detects a build pack, and this time it's a Java application. It will put the build pack and the application code into a container, and then once the application is run, it's just basically instances of that container are being scheduled. This might take a second or so. The network connection that we have here is not the fastest, so it's uploaded now. And it's building the application. So it says uploading droplets. That basically means the source code plus the build pack is now where it should be. The container is created, and now it's basically waiting for that to start.
Yes, started. Just
5 minutes now.
try it very fast.
5 minutes. Okay, and now you can see the application has started. It comes and wait. Can you go to the command line real quick again?
Yeah.
So basically the only two things you need to do is like to execute that CF push, and then you're gonna Cloud Foundry is gonna come back with such an URL, and this is basically the URL that your end users are supposed to get and access, and with that have access to your application. So it really is that simple. And now this is like a sample application that we have built. It basically detects which provider it is running on. If you scale it up, you could see that the different instances of that you're running, and also if it's bound to a service or not. In this case, we haven't bound it to a service yet, so it connects automatically to a Java built-in database, an H2. If you now bound it to like the previously created service, we could attach it to that as well. But I'm afraid we're not going to have the time for that because we might leave some room for questions. So let's just go back to the slides real quick. So yes, so just to close this down a little, I mean, of course you can get open source support from the ambassador and from the local resources. In case you want to take it more serious, it's of course a good idea to let people do that have a bit of experience with this. So these are like the companies that you will probably also find if you go down to the exhibition hall where all the sponsor booths are, because these are the company that we know, and like we as Novatec are listed there as well. We work with those platforms, and we can be able to like either point you out to other people. So for example, yesterday there was quite a bit of an interest around the topic of Bosch and like operational things. For example, this is something we would not do, but then I could easily say, well, go talk to the folks from Any9, so Stark and Wayne or Engineer Better. I know that they are doing this, so it's more like a helpful than a competitive ecosystem, I would say. And reach out to those companies if you want more professional services. So with that, I would like to say thanks, and just a quick highlight of the people basically involved with this. These were the two students that did the research initially. Steve Greenberg was the one that helped us and refute the things when we did the Cloud Foundry experiment, and also Emmanuel, which I think is in the room. He updated all of that to bring it to the latest state. So thanks for everyone being involved here. And so next steps for you is basically, if in case you haven't done that yet, now go and download the CLI, register with a provider of your choice, walk through try Cloud Foundry, push your own code, and get the training, get certified, and you will like it. So with that, I would end the talk now and open it up for questions. There's a question.
Okay, I'm quite new in Cloud Foundry.
Mm-hmm.
Could you clarify me a little bit how Cloud Foundry handling the data? I know that application is written from core perspective or paradigm. The data is outside of the Cloud Foundry. What about the legacy application with the local participants?
Well, this is a very good question. I mean, the question was about how Cloud Foundry handles data or like legacy stateful service backends, if I understood you correctly. And as Mirna showed before, a built-in nature of the platform is like to separate application, which are meant to be at least stateless, in ideal case to a factor compliant, and stateful backend services. Now, the back-end services are normally provided by the platform team or whoever owns the platform. In case, if you need a back-end system that is not offered in that list, if you have like a legacy application or you want to run a technology that the service provider does not offer, there are various options. I mean, what we didn't touch here, but what I think there will be a talk on that today, is the so-called Open Service Broker API. So you can basically build an own service broker for your legacy application and then attach it to Cloud Foundry, and then you can consume it in the same style of like create and bind service. If you don't want to like write a full-blown broker and you just maybe want to have like a test connection and not include that into like a in a productive environment or whatsoever, there's a so-called user-defined service. If you have, they're like the system-provided services and the user-defined services. And with that, you basically just add the endpoint of a service definition and the credentials, and then you can use the create service and bind service command in the same style, and the information to connect will be injected into the application. Does that answer your question? Cool. Any more? I don't think we have time for more, but we're going to be around. Either, I mean, I'm probably going to be mostly in this room, but we have a booth downstairs. Here are a lot of our colleagues. You can see them in the Novatec shirts. Just grab and ask them. And yeah, with that, we would say thanks for listening.